say I love your senator.
Yes.
We do too.
Yes, and I love his staff. All of his, I mean, we got to know each other last year when we were screening the film Mind Polluters, which Senator Hall screened that film, I don't know how many times, at least probably, yeah.
I can go word for word and say the whole thing.
I know, we had to listen to it a lot. So, but I, as Lori said, I grew up in Texas, and I'm a really proud sixth-generation Texan, daughter of the Republic of Texas, but I spent most of my adult life in San Diego, 30 years. And I woke up one morning in early 2019, and I recognize it now as the Holy Spirit. But I basically had the strongest feeling, stronger than anything in my life, that I had to get out of there, that we had to get out of there. And I told my husband, my poor husband, who has a business, established business in Southern California, and he looked at me like I was crazy. I mean, I just, that was an impossible thing in his mind. And so for about 3 months, though, I was, just had this feeling it was life or death, and he describes me during that time as a caged animal. And so I imagine I was probably not a very nice lady to live with. So he went, about 3 months after that, he said, if this is that, if you feel this strongly about it, then I have to listen to you. And wow. So we picked a good man. Yes, that was when he realized he married a Texan. So, and my daddy used to say, you can take the girl out of Texas, but you can't take Texas out of the
Come
girl.
on, somebody.
So anyway, so about 3 months after that, we landed in East Texas in Tyler, and thank God we did. I tell you, I know that was in August of 2019. Y'all know what happened in 2020. And that's when I got really activated in Texas politics, and I started Texas Freedom Coalition. Have loved being a part of that organization for the last 3 years, but recently, when I was elected to the State Republican Executive Committee, I decided to walk away from that and focus entirely on representing my district in Senate District 1. And so I'm really, really honored to do that. I'm honored to serve on the board of the Republican Party of Texas. We have a great party. I think it's an example for the rest of the country. And I represent, 19 counties in Northeast Texas, some of the most conservative Christian areas, counties of the state. And in addition to that, I serve on the Resolutions Committee, but I also serve on the Legislative Priorities Committee. And I'm chair of the subcommittee. Yeah, I think so. I think we did. Yeah. So I chair the subcommittee on Stop Sexualizing Texas Kids, one of our 8 priorities. And I tell you what, I started on this issue about a year and a half ago almost in my community of Tyler, Texas. And I'll tell you what happened. One day I got a call. I was on my way up to Arkansas with my husband. We were going to celebrate our anniversary. So I'll never forget it. But I got a call from Jill Glover. Do y'all know Jill?
Yes.
Okay, so she called me and said, hey, can you audit the school library in Tyler? She knew my oldest son went to school there. And I said, sure, I can do that when we get back from Arkansas. I'll start looking into it. I got off the phone with her and I thought to myself, there's no way I'm going to find any books in Tyler. I live in the most conservative Christian community in the state. Well, I got home and I started looking, and literally, at this point now, 300 books later, I was shocked, absolutely shocked at what I found. And if I tell you what, I mean, if I wasn't a nice woman for those 3 months with my husband, I really wasn't a nice lady to live with for about 2 weeks after what I found, because I was mad. I've been in education for over a decade. I'm a special education advocate, former teacher, a mom for 18 years almost now, and I thought I should have known that this filth was in our libraries. But I was really angry about how it even got there in the first place. And so I really became a dog on a mission. And so we were one of the lucky ones that I'll tell you in Tyler. We've had almost 300 books removed from the school library. So, which is a very unusual thing, unfortunately, in the state. Very unusual thing in Senate District 1, where I live, where we are trying to get these books removed, and it almost seems impossible. And so what we've learned is that it's not a local issue anymore. The state has a compelling interest to protect kids from sexualization in our schools and outside of our schools too. The state has a compelling interest. We're going to talk about that concept in a minute a little bit more. But I want you to know, most of your legislators actually even, and most people have not actually seen the books that we're talking about. Now, I don't typically get up and interrupt a meeting. I'm so sorry I had to do that, but I wanted to pass out some examples for you so that you could kind of look at it and see for yourself. Now, those are some written examples, and then I have a packet here that I handed out to your legislators, including Keith Bell, Representative Bell, who does not want this in our schools, he's told me, and I believe him. But I'll go ahead and pass this around, and I would just say let's just skip y'all's table for now because you have a young man at your table. So, but let's just pass it around. If you want to look at what we're talking about.
Yeah, we're aware of some of the books.
I've been in the school library before.
So you know, but I still don't. I mean, it's really that bad, and we definitely don't want you to see it. Yeah.
Most of the books that they have in the California districts, it is crazy.
Is that where you're from? Are you from? No.
No,
Okay.
I was born and raised here in Point.
Okay.
Well, not born, but mostly here.
All right. Well, we're still not going to let you.
I don't want to see it.
We're still not going to let you see it.
We're the party of law and order. We can't break the law.
So thankfully, yes, ma'am.
Have you followed through to make sure they're not back in once they take them out? Because that's
Yeah.
happening.
Yeah, we do. We've been going back, and we've worked a lot with Dr. Marty Crawford, and then from time to time we will look. And we have found too that there are some of the books. We have a list of over 900 books, and that list keeps growing. We keep adding to it. 900 filthy books marketed to children and potentially in our Texas schools. And so it's constant. I mean, we do have to, I have people working on it constantly and looking and auditing. So one of the wonderful things I think about our grassroots is that we as a grassroots are very informed overall. And so a lot of our delegates went down to convention and they pushed this as a legislative priority. And so we have that. It's our fourth legislative priority is stop sexualizing Texas kids. And when you look at the legislative priority, it's broken down into two parts. It's really, the beginning of it is about what we call the affirmative defense or obscenity exemption. And so a lot of people have asked, well, how do these books get into our schools? Or how is this legal? Well, because really, quite literally, I mean, it seems like it would be obscene, the material. And so in our harmful to minors law, we have a definition of what that is, what criteria it takes to meet the definition of harmful to minors, because it's illegal to distribute material that's harmful to minors. And so there's a few things in that law currently. Number one, there's loopholes within the definition. It's really unfortunate. So the loopholes are that you have to look at it as a whole. So you can't just look at excerpts, you can't just look at one, page of pornography. You have to look at it as a whole, the theme of it as a whole. It has to appeal to prurient interests, which are sexual interests, and it has to be utterly without redeeming social value, utterly without. So it's an extremely hard standard to meet. And I will tell you that the authors who write this filth for children They understand the law, they know the loopholes, and so they write it and they market it to kids anyway. Because it's not illegal to do that. The other thing is that if you do have something that actually does meet the standard of harmful to minors, there's an affirmative defense in education. So if it's education related, that is a defense to prosecution. And so our legislative priority for the RPT part of it is to remove that affirmative defense. And we have several bills, including Senator Hall has written one, Brian Slayton has written one, Cole Hefner, we have quite a few actually. A lot of our new legislators have written this bill. So I'm pretty sure we'll end up getting that affirmative defense removed. It's very likely that that will move. But it's not going to do very much for this problem of what we're finding in Texas schools. Now, let me rewind for a second because y'all are starting to look through the literature. Let me be clear on what we're finding in our schools. I'm talking about the most sexually explicit, graphic detail of sexual acts between mostly minors, but also minors and adults, like little kids and adults. Every single, it's heterosexual, it's homosexual. There's even books that have sex between, or talks about sex between people and animals. These are books that promote watching pornography as a minor, which we know is extremely harmful to their mental health. Promotes marijuana use, underage drinking, abortion. I mean, it's just unbelievable. You're getting a small sampling, and it's not even the worst of it, what you're seeing necessarily. And so, so those books, though, are currently, it is legal to give those to kids and provide them in the schools. Yes, sir.
I've looked at this, and it's titled Sexually Explicit. What kind of loophole would allow something that's sexually explicit to be in the library?
Well, that's what I print out to put on top of it. And that packet, the first 2 weeks of the legislative session when I was down at the Capitol, I had a lot of really good meetings. And one of the things that we did was we would show that packet, that exact packet, to several of your legislators, including Keith Bell. That's the exact one that I showed him. And I would put on the cover sexually explicit in order to warn, to give a little warning. And then when you turn the page, you can see it. Now, part of the reason why we are pushing so hard on educating as to what this is that the other side can really take control of the narrative, and we're going to talk about that in a minute. And they can really talk about this issue in a way that is so untruthful. And so we're just providing as much information right now to Republicans, to voters, but especially our legislators. And we just started a campaign, my committee just started an education campaign where your Texas legislators every day until the end of session will receive one title of excerpts every day until the end of session.
That's good.
Yeah, so we're doing that through email. So, and I can even track to see, what's been opened and all of that. But they will not be able to, they will have to defend that, and they will know what they're defending. And I don't think most people can defend that being given to kids. But the loophole, back to your question, the loophole is that when we define in the penal code, so we're looking at criminal code, what is considered harmful to minors, there's a loophole in it that you have to look at the material as a whole. So actually I didn't include that in that packet. This book is full of pornographic images. But when we take it as a whole, it doesn't meet the criteria of pornography or obscenity, or harmful to minors. Because taken as a whole, the theme is not sexual. The theme is about, love and acceptance and other things. So that's a loophole. And then utterly without social value. This book is so pornographic, it's awful, it's terrible. And it's in middle schools in Texas and high schools. And because if taken as a whole, it doesn't meet prurient interest, and because taken as a whole, it is not utterly without social redeeming value, it doesn't meet harmful to minors law. But your Senator Bob Hall, has a bill, SB 828, that changes the definition of what is harmful to minors. And I'm asking all of you to put your support behind it and make phone calls and get, we got to rally up support behind it, because it would close those loopholes in the law. And so that would be a really good thing. SB 828. Now here's the thing. Between the hours of 6 a.m. and 10 p.m., this material that you have at your tables could not be read over American airwaves. Why is that?
Is it pornographic?
Yeah, and because there might be children present. Yet, when we know children are present in our Texas schools, we don't protect them from these filthy books. So the FCC doesn't allow it, and yet our school libraries have it. And so do our public libraries in the children's section. And so does Barnes & Noble, and all the bookstores in their children's section has these books, marketing to kids. And yes?
No, I never interrupt, I'm sorry.
No, it's
If
okay.
you're a parent and you go to a school board meeting and you complain about these books and you start reading,
Yeah.
and we've seen the worst of the worst, they
Yeah.
will have you arrested for obscenity.
Yeah, I think we've all seen the mics being cut off on the news.
Yep.
Because you can't say these things
No.
on public airwaves, and yet they'll give it to the kids. The FCC recognizes that content like this, indecent content and profane content, they have to regulate it because it hurts kids. It hurts their development, and we're supposed to protect kids from harmful things. And so in their regulations, when they define indecent content, they cite the Miller test that is included in our penal code to define obscenity or harmful to minors, and they say we have to go beyond that to protect kids because the standard is too high. And yet our Texas public schools in their library policies, all they say is that you can't have obscene books in the library. So again, not to belabor this point too much, but the FCC regulates for obscenity 24 hours a day on their airwaves because it is literally illegal to give that out on hand that out to people who produce that. And yet, and then they go beyond that, 12 hours of the day to protect kids. And yet in our public schools, they only protect kids from what's illegal to give them. And so one of the things that we want to do, one of the biggest solutions that we're promoting is we want mandatory library standards in Texas. We don't have them right now. What we have are recommended guidelines, and they're developed through what we call the TSLAC, the Texas State Library and Archives Commission, in coordination with the State Board of Education. And so they have this set of guidelines, but we want mandatory guidelines only when it comes to collection and development. And there's a bill that does that, and I'm so excited about this bill. It's called HB 1655, and it's by Jared Patterson. And it creates mandatory standards that prohibit sexually explicit materials, the materials that are in that packet, it prohibits them from being in our school libraries. Yes, amen, yes. And it also, though, goes beyond that, and any books that are related to, that have sexual content in them that wouldn't meet that explicit category, but books maybe about reproduction that aren't sexually explicit, it would require parental permission to check those books out.
That's good.
Yes, sir.
Again, if this bill, I've not read it.
Uh-huh.
If the bill has mandatory requirements, which I think is great, does it also have mandatory penalties for the school boards and librarians disregard the mandatory requirements?
Well, what it has an enforcement mechanism, and it's a really interesting one, and I think it's a really good one in a lot of ways. What it does is it puts the onus of responsibility on the vendors, and if the vendors provide any sexually explicit materials to Texas schools, their contract is ended. So it hurts them in the pocketbook. Now, I'm with you. I'd like to see civil penalties. I would like to see criminal penalties, and that's actually in our priority too. We want to see a lot done on this issue, and there's a lot of good bills out there. But I like the enforcement mechanism of this because when we look at, let's take the FCC again. The FCC, right, they, or the entertainment industry. When they're rating content, those are their own ratings. They self-regulate because if they get in trouble, if they get in trouble with the FCC, they're penalized for it. Now, one of the things you might be thinking right now, though, and we've thought about this, is that our culture, community standards are just going into the gutter. I mean. And so we're seeing, boundaries pushed, and we have for a long time. And so, so I realize that, but I do think that there's a really clear definition of what sexually explicit is in this bill. And if vendors provide books like that, they're cut off. And I mean, Texas buys a lot of books. And so I think it's a really good enforcement mechanism. Yes, sir.
Sure, somebody else has questions. But you're saying if it's sexually explicit, but if it's not the majority in publications, okay. Is there something that says if there's sexually explicit material in this, regardless if it's page 1 out of 10,000 pages, it's not allowed? Yes,
that's what the bill does. Because what we have currently is harmful to minors or obscenity, and what the definition of that is that you can have, you can have a page that's pornographic in a book, but because it's in a book, it's not considered harmful to minors. That's in our penal code currently. That's what our penal code is. So what this says, and already in Texas schools, they're not supposed to have things that are obscene or harmful to minors that meet the penal code. And so what this does is it goes beyond that, and it says anything that's defined as sexually explicit, which is the examples that I provided you, those also cannot be in the school library. Does that make sense to everybody? Okay. Yes, ma'am.
I have a two-part question.
Okay.
Would there be some type of rating type on these books, such as like in the 90s CDs, a parental advisory, and on movies?
Yeah, that's a great question. So in HB 1655, the bill that we talked about, the vendor is also responsible for labeling sexually explicit. So it would have a content warning sexually explicit on there. And I think that would be a great deterrent. We've talked about, as a committee and with legislators, we've talked a lot about rating systems. Different people have different thoughts on that. I personally like explicit content warnings that detail, sexually explicit or sexually graphic marijuana use, abortion, but not necessarily a rating like a PG-13. And I'll give you an example of why. On your tables, when you look at this content, this is from a website called booklooks.org, and I'm going to get to the second part of your question. So this is a great website, a great resource. It's where we can find examples of sexually explicit content from about 350 books now. And you can see, though, that they rate them, and they rate them from 0 to 5. I think it's so subjective because there are books that they give a 3 or a 4 that I would give a 5. And so if a parent sees that or someone sees that, they may think, oh, well, a 3 isn't that bad or a 4 is not that bad. And so I just think a sexually explicit warning is probably the way to go. And that's what Jared Patterson's bill does. Now, before we get to your second part, let me say this. We have some other bills. There's 2 bills actually right now that label books. That one of them is by Dr. Oliverson, Representative Oliverson, very well-intentioned, wants to protect kids. But the bill that he has, what it does is it creates a system of labeling or rating. It's a complicated rating system that would be imposed by the state. And then for the books like this that are sexually explicit, they would have basically like a NC-17 type of rating where 17-year-olds could check them out in the library with parental permission. So literally what it would do is codify into Texas law that your tax dollars can go to buying sexually explicit materials like the ones that I just showed you, to create a separate section in the school library that is literally X-rated. Accessible if they have parental permission. Well, I'm going to tell you right now, this is not a parental rights and education issue. And that is something that I have drilled in over and over again, and it is worth repeating, and I will continue to repeat it. This is not a parental rights and education issue. The state has a compelling interest to protect kids from sexual abuse. The sexualization of children is a form of emotional sexual abuse. It sets them up to be exploited, which is something that you're working on, Ray. It sets them up for sexual exploitation. When you give children characteristics of sex, the characteristics of adult sex, you are setting them up for abuse. It is pedophilia. It is pedophilia. It is an emotional sexual abuse, so it's a lot harder to pinpoint and define and identify, because acts of physical abuse are always easier to do that. So we have to make it very clear that this is not a parental rights and education issue. There are a lot of parental rights and education issues. This isn't one of them. And we can't solve it with a parental rights and education solution. And we have another bill by Lynn Stuckey that does that says that you can remove the student who's being groomed in their school. And so I don't want to talk too much about the bills we're not supporting, but I just think it just really, I think, though, is important to mention that we want to just prohibit sexually explicit books from the library, period. And that's what 1655 does. Okay, you had a second part.
Well, and the reason I wanted to know that is because the left is master manipulators at wording and verbiage with this deceit. And so, and you have an educational background. That's not my background. So I'm curious. Do these schools have to have a minimum, some kind of a award-winning author or illustrator? Is there a minimum? Something
Well,
like that?
I know our public libraries where this is a problem as well, that they there is something within a lot of their collections where if it's an award-winning book, then they will definitely have to keep it on their shelves longer, things like that. When it comes to schools, what we're finding is a lot of these books, All Boys Aren't Blue is one of them that is in your pile there. It is so graphic. I mean, the detail that it goes into, it promotes incest, it promotes watching pornography as a minor, it promotes using marijuana, underage drinking. It's just a horrible book. Well, that book was given a Tasha Award by the Texas Library Association. Tasha Award is recommended reading for 9th grade and up.
Wow.
And when you're, as a librarian, you're supposed to seek out award-winning books. And so, I mean, I know as a parent, I loved seeing the Caldecott Award winners. You know, I'd look for that gold. Yeah, I mean, and we trusted that. Those were trusted brands. And so, you know, you do have some librarians out there who are not indoctrinated into this, who are just looking at, you know, award-winning literature and then buying these books. And so there is a component of awards that plays into this. But when you put a label sexually explicit, then that's a great warning for a library that might get a donation. But it's also, again, I think that mechanism of creating a really strong penalty that, you know, money speaks. I mean, that's the world we live in. So when you penalize the vendor for providing those books, I think that's really helpful. Yes, ma'am?
When you find them and you're able to get them out of the schools, are they destroyed? Like, can we have a bonfire?
Well, I know, I will proudly carry that torch, burn those books. Yeah, you know, I think right now, I think a lot of them are being kind of put away in boxes.
So it's easier to get them back in without anybody.
Yeah, although, I mean, some of them are probably, you know, being snuck out. But I think, again, what you're saying kind of reminds me of something again about Dr. Oliverson's bill, which again, I think he is well-intentioned. Well-intentioned legislators can create bad legislation though, unfortunately. But what his bill does is totally undoes the work that parents like me have done in their local communities, because every single one of those books that I got removed would be put back in and codified into Texas law that they can be there.
If they were burned and they'd have to buy them back, they might think twice.
Yeah.
I think those some of them are kept for evidence also.
Yes, yes. Yeah. So, let me think. So, the other solution that we've talked about, or one of the other problems, is these discussions around gender and sexuality that are happening in our schools. So I know, you know, the sexually explicit books, I'll tell you, that's a little bit of a different issue. And then, of course, the conversations that are happening in schools, the clubs, the celebration of Pride Week, and just this overt sex, you know, just these conversations that shouldn't be taking place. That's another part of our priority. And we are seeing legislation to address that as well. There's a really good bill by Ken King. Oh, I have to look up the number. It prohibits those discussions. I'll look up the number before we leave. Or maybe Chris could look it up for me. If you look at Ken King, so that does have a really strong penalty, civil penalty in it. And that would just prohibit discussions and celebrations over sexuality. And then there's another bill by Jared Patterson, it's HB 1155. And that bill also prohibits these discussions through 8th grade. So what we're seeing in Texas is that the bills that are being filed go through 8th grade. In Florida, you might be familiar with their bill that was dubbed the Don't Say Gay bill. Actually, and that reminds me, Representative Toth has a bill that's similar to 1155 that he calls it the don't say gay bill. So that one also prohibits, I think, these discussions through 8th grade as well. So we're still analyzing a few of these bills to see how close they are to the language, and if the SREC, if our subcommittee is going to recommend supporting them. I think we will. And so we update that, on our website. Yes, ma'am. Did someone have a question? Yes.
You mentioned emailing, using through email pages of these books.
Yes.
How do you get through FCC on that?
What was the last part?
The FCC regulates airways.
Oh, well, email they don't regulate, so I can send it through email, and even the internet. I mean, the internet too. I mean, I can post all these things on Twitter. I really kind of try not to post a lot of it because it's so graphic.
Yeah.
I have done a little bit, but now what I'm doing to show what's being sent to our legislators, I'm just creating a visual that shows the content that's in there with a link to, more examples of it. So, but yeah, the internet, that brings up another thing that I know our legislators are working on, but we don't have a bill filed yet, is age verification for online pornography. That has to happen. We have to have that. Well, Louisiana.
I was gonna say that about Louisiana. Are we gonna try and do something similar to what they did?
Yes. Yeah. So you're familiar with the bill in Louisiana? Yeah. So Louisiana just they passed a bill where they have online verification for pornography, and it went into effect in January. We grew up in a time where we had to sneak this stuff. And some of those stories that were like coming of age, but the stuff that we snuck, or that people, probably mostly boys, but some girls too, I guess. But the stuff that was snuck, it was not what you're seeing on the web. What they have access on the internet is, it's dark pornography. It is, just about anything that you can imagine and can find on the web. Those are your grandkids and our kids that are able to do that. And really, as a society, I think we need to start solving this problem for his generation. I'll end with this, although let's keep talking, and I'd love to answer more questions, but let me end with this. What one generation tolerates, the next generation will embrace. What are y'all willing to tolerate? Are we willing to tolerate the sexualization of children? Because the next generation will embrace it. And it's pedophilia. That's the end game. It's pedophilia. So let's not tolerate it. And what we have tolerated, like pornography on the web, at our kids' fingertips, on their phones and their devices, let's not tolerate it anymore. Louisiana is not tolerating it anymore. They have a solution in Louisiana, and Pornhub now requires ID to get onto their website. Louisiana figured it out. I think Texas can figure it out too.
Yeah, I would think.
Louisiana is a great place. It's not, but Louisiana figured it out. Texas can figure it out too. So.
1507 is King King's.
Okay, 1507. Yes, 15. Write that one down. That's another one of our favorites.
That's one by campaign.
Yes. Yes.
Relating to school programs dedicated to celebrating or providing special instruction regarding sexual preference.
Yeah, we like that one.
Is that SB?
That's an HB. One of the other things that I've heard from some of our legislators is they think this is an isolated problem. It is not an isolated problem. It is all over the state. And that's why we're doing that campaign, not only to show them exactly what is in our schools and how bad it is, but to let them know that it's not an isolated problem. It's all across the state. It is bad. But it's a really good issue to be working on. And oh boy, I tell you what, the best thing that came out of, I think, the no dim chairs and the buses is the grassroots is organized. And like Chris was saying and Marty was saying, we need you to make calls. And here, you know, each one of you has a sphere of influence. Each one of you has family and friends, maybe your church, people who you can ask to make calls. And so I really encourage you to get very active in the legislative session. We only have, how many days left? 100 days? 100 days left.
Morning's already gone.
Yeah, we have a 4-month session every 2 years, which is a good thing. But it requires us to really get active. And I would say that your phone calls are more important than anything.
Yep.
And you know, what you said, just kind of, it's like your Eureka moment. Do you tolerate, you were asking us, do you tolerate pornography for kids?
Yeah,
That's a good thing to ask a rep's office when you call the office.
yeah,
Does Representative so-and-so tolerate pornography for children?
Yeah.
Yes or no? Well, no. Well, then why didn't he vote for it? Why didn't she vote for it? Is he supporting HB 1507?
yeah.
I need to know. I will call back tomorrow and expect an answer.
Yeah,
mean,
and
you
I
don't
would
get those all the
say
time.
it like that, like
Yeah.
what Chris,
You don't have to cuss them out. I mean,
no, that's not effective,
Yeah.
cussing them out.
One thing I've heard from some of these state reps, the ones that are considered the outsides, they may agree with the bill, but they won't even support it just because they don't like the person.
oh, there's no doubt.
Well, we're not gonna tolerate that either, because, because I tell you what, I mean, this is about our kids. This is about our posterity and the world, the Texas that we're gonna leave for them. And so we're not gonna tolerate politics as usual. And if we as a grassroots are able to put enough pressure on them, they will be forced to do it. And I would say that they wanna do it. A lot of them, there's an appetite for this. My thing is that we have to make sure they understand which ones are the good bills, like 1655, is it 823 or the one by Senator Hall, 820, I have it written down. I don't have it memorized yet, I'm sorry.
Oh, 820.
Is it 820? I think it's 823.
823.
Yeah.
I got it.
828.
828.
Okay.
Right.
Yeah, 828. Sorry. That one just got filed. I don't have it memorized yet. Yes, sir.
I have a question about phone calls. Would you, and Chris, would you say a handwritten letter is more effective than a phone call, or would I be wasting my time composing a letter?
I don't think it's a waste of time to send a letter, especially to your own representative and your own legislator. I just think there's something about their offices getting 500 or 1,000 or 5,000 calls in a day, like where it is literally ringing off the
Right, I'll
hook.
say, I recognize that number, so Mr. Brewer called again.
Oh,
But that was good. You know,
Yeah.
he's gonna keep calling every day,
yeah,
you know, and I will tell you something.
Don't call just once, call every day.
Every day, take your
You
time.
got 100 phone calls.
Yeah, oh, yeah, and it works.
it
I
does.
mean,
And
the good thing is with Senator Hall, it does, it's not necessary. Mainly what I get are people that, from the other side. It's
Right.
California.
y'all are getting a lot of crazy calls about certain bills that you're
Oh, yeah.
filing. Yeah, that's what I've heard.
But if people, they start feeling the pressure and say, well, if you're on the phone with me, say, I'll make sure I'm down in Laredo County or up in Denton County campaigning against so-and-so, and I'll make sure there are a bunch of people with me.
Yeah,
You know, I will make sure, because I don't want my kids sexualized. Does
Yeah.
he?
yeah.
And after a while, and I'm telling you, it works.
It does. I think the phone calls we have. there was a call to action that a lot of us sent out. I just sent it out today because the Appropriations Committee for Public Education is meeting tomorrow. Have you heard about this, Bruce? I just got it this morning, but they're meeting tomorrow. It's chaired by Van Deaver, and it has to do with pediatric gender modification and some of our big universities that are asking for money. Well, they're also some of the worst offenders of pediatric gender modification. So I had a call to action out for everyone in my district to call Representative Van Deaver, who chairs that committee. So those are the ones you want to target. Your own representative, your own senator, but your senator's on top of it.
Yeah.
But your representative, your senator, the speaker, and I would say the chair of committees. But I did hear that Van Deaver's gotten a lot of calls today.
And maybe it's Republicans
Yeah.
will be calling.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You're not gonna change the Democrats' mind.
No.
But you wanna make sure that the rhinos, you know what I'm saying, they switch.
Well, at least feel the pressure.
Feel the pressure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
To answer your question, Jim, I would say a phone call is the most important, because even if you don't get your rep, you're gonna get somebody that works in his desk. They write all those phone calls down and give them to him.
Have to.
And then secondly, the second most effective thing is probably a handwritten letter. They're apt to read those. Email is probably the worst, because they may or may not read those. They may just, especially if it's a form email, a lot of times they just delete those.
And they're so
But
secure
phone-
at the Capitol, they may not even get it.
I know because I'm tracking. I put a little tracker in my email.
So you know if they open it.
So I know if
Well,
they're
I
opening
emailed
it.
them that.
And
They
if they're,
ask for a receipt. So-
yes, and if they're not opening them, we'll figure out another way to get it to them. Yes,
Christian,
right.
you mentioned our text that we did earlier today when we came in.
Oh, yeah.
The text that we did, we sent that out, Valerie, myself, and several others in here, got together, Larry, got together, and Pam, we got together and devised a text for the,
Ban Democratic chairs.
ban Democrat chairs. But the most important thing that we did is we targeted, you've got to be very, very
Strategic.
diligent in developing your point that you're trying to get across.
Yeah.
And, you know, what I would do if we were targeting these library books and everything, we would build a committee of people like you, sit down and do the text, put it all together, which would be, more powerful.
Yeah.
And the thing, and it's kind of expensive, we spend $800 on that text. But if we take and pick up $20 or $25 a piece in here and do it, we can do it, and I guarantee you, it got our state reps' attention.